Dale Earnhardt was great. Nobody's going to question that. But to those who never saw him race, you'd probably think that NASCAR was the Intimidator show, where Big E had the same all-consuming popularity as his son. But not so. In fact, in the years after his 7th championship from 1995 through 2000, he was a key piece of the puzzle, but not the only one. In fact, the other people he raced against had personalities as memorable as his own. Dale Jarrett was someone you did not screw with. He was like Earnhardt, but taller and meaner, wearing a mullet and mashing the gas on a bad, fast Robert Yates engine. DJ may have been terrible at the road courses, but he was a force to be reckoned with in the richest races. He held off Earnhardt in the first 2 of his 3 Daytona 500 wins, won 2 Brickyard 400s, and he would have won a 3rd if he hadn't only made up 4 laps after running out of fuel. Then you had Rusty Wallace with his bad, fast hot rods dominating the short tracks, especially Bristol. He won his first race there and also his 50th. Aggressive to a fault, Rusty had the best name, the best sunglasses, and I swear the best public relations guy in the sport.
The Miller Genuine Draft Rusty Wallace stock car. Pick it up, Rusty! Awesome. What opened up?
Mark Martin was the fastest, most precise, and downright strongest guy out there. Watch him go flat out at Michigan, or dominate Watkins Glen for 3 straight years. He hated plate racing almost as much as Rusty did, but that didn't stop him from taking the fastest race in NASCAR history at Talladega. There was Bobby Labonte, who unintentionally became the cameraman to some of the sport's biggest moments. Labonte was the quad oval specialist and owned the keys to Atlanta, as Mike Skinner once said.
You know, a few years ago, I figured they was going to name this place Earnhardt Speedway because he won all the races here, and then this kid named Bobby Labonte came along in this damn Pontiac, and we've had trouble with this guy, I'll tell you.
There was Jeff Burton, the guy who always seemed to win the rain-shortened races. He did it at Darlington twice and once in Las Vegas. Most often, Jeff's success came at the cost of his much cooler and harder-to-understand brother, Wah Martin.
When I'm down, I don't ever get in those guys' way. That guy was up there all damn day.
Poor Ward finished second to his brother 3 times in 1999 and had to wait 5 years between his first 2 wins. Bill Elliott was the sport's most popular driver, even with a winless streak that ended up lasting over 7 seasons. The tall guy with the red hair always drove a red car, except the one year he didn't, and then he left that team to drive Junior Johnson's red cars, then start a team to run red cars of his own. Then there was the elder statesman, Darryl Waltrip, the man without a generation. He'd bridged the gap between the Pettys and the Earnhardts, but you know what? He never quite fit in with either group. Too young for the first and too old for the second. Winless since '92, DW still gave the best interviews, and he had some of the best-looking cars on the track. I only say some of the best paint schemes because the very best belonged to Kyle Petty. Mellow Yellow, Coors Light, and the true Mount Everest of them all, Hot Wheels. Each one of them matched the wild style of the King's son, who also had the best hair. And these were just some of the most iconic paint schemes of the time. The Skull Bandit, the Tide Ride, the Kodiak Bear, and Cartoon Network Wacky Racing. The payoff was huge for even the smallest brands. Where else but NASCAR would a guy on the West Coast learn about Shoney's restaurants or Big Apple markets? Forget Earnhardt's 20 years of trying. We had guys looking to get back to victory lane after several years. Derek Cope, Greg Sachs, Lake Speed, Brett Bodine, Kenny Schrader, and Mr. Excitement himself, Jimmy Spencer. And we had winless guys too, of course. Michael Waltrip was still stacking up his winless streak, along with other hard luck heroes like Rick Mast, Dick Trickle, and Robert Presley. Even the guys running further back still had awesome names like Gary Bradbury, Billy Standridge, and the king of them all, Roy Buckshot Jones. Young Guns? Heck, the closest thing we had to that were Jeremy Mayfield, John Andretti, Johnny Benson, Bobby Hamilton, and Joe Nemechek, and all of them earned their stripes before they won, and when they did, it was a story.
This last week at Rockingham, man, you said, well, we had a bad day here, we always do, we're going to go to Phoenix to win the race. By gosh, you did it.
And these guys cared. Even a top 10 wasn't taken for granted.
Darryl, a lot of people left you for dead. Your career, you've shown them that you still have the fire.
They didn't put quite enough dirt on me. Kicked it off and crawled back out. I've been in holes before and crawling out of a pretty deep one right now, but damn, this is good.
Everybody to help me get here. I can't help it. That's okay. We're not stopping you. Enjoy them. Don't show much emotion. This is winning for me. Thanks.
This was a golden age where the greats were at their greatest. Terry Labonte was the Iron Man, not letting an injured wrist stop him from his 600th consecutive start. Ricky Rudd nearly passed out trying to win in his 16th straight season. Dave Marcus drove in wingtip shoes for 32 straight Daytona 500s. Speaking of the 500s, Sterling Marlin won 2 in a row, which no one has done since. Then you had Ernie Irvan, who lost an eye and nearly his life in a wreck at Michigan. 3 years later, he comes back to the same track and wins.
It's pretty emotional. Started about 10 laps to go, started getting tears in my eye. But I tell you, it's great. Only in America, you know what I mean?
All of this was presented across several TV networks, and each of them had their own adrenaline-pumping music. Forget Blake Shelton. This, ladies and gentlemen, is how it's done. More often than not, this involved a one-way trip to ESPN Speed World.
ESPN, the worldwide leader in sports, and the National Association for Stock Car Auto Racing, NASCAR, welcome you live for the Pontiac Excitement 400 NASCAR Winston Cup race.
Bob Jenkins, Eli Gold, and the granddaddy of them all, Ken Squire. These guys knew you were in for something epic.
1 minute until they start the engines. 43 Winston Cup cars lined up single file, ready to go for 200 laps, 500 miles. $2.6 million at stake.
These networks even took the time to build storylines based on previous races.
Finally, the track too tough to tame welcomed Jarrett to victory lane, but Burton battled tire trouble in Texas, then got mashed 1 week later in Martinsville.
If they missed anything, you would get introduced during the starting lineup, which introduced not only every driver, but eventually every paint scheme.
Hey, you know something, buddy? Todd Bodine getting rave reviews from the crew in that number 30 car.
Absolutely. I talked to the crew this morning. They said he is so knowledgeable about the race car. If it was up to them, they wouldn't mind signing him up for a long contract. But that's still up for grabs on the as far as what the owner wants to do. But they really think a lot of Todd Bodine as the driver.
Even the commercials were exciting. Get that? The commercials! I don't know what today's ads are selling, but 2 decades later, I still look for son-of-a-gun protected and split-fire Performance V spark plugs. Castrol GTX produced horror films.
Because if your viscosity breaks down, what's next?
I also still live by a few simple truths. Hooters make you happy, wider is better, and if you want to add more life to your car, take it to the stars. Let me ask you this, when did we become too good for jingles? I can still remember. We keep America running. We keep America running. And I can still sing every one of the words to the One True Beer commercial. Come on along, head for the mountains of Busch Beer. Head for the mountains, it's cold and it's smooth, and it's waiting for you. Come on, head for the mountains of Busch Beer. I don't even drink beer. All of this was in service to the greatest hope of all, that Jeff Gordon wouldn't win yet another race. I'm not kidding. Forget Earnhardt, Gordon was the greatest villain the sport had ever seen. Clean-cut, smiling, and dominant. You just wanted to see the old folks get one more chance to take him down. And when it happened, it was glorious.
And look at the damage on Jeff's car. Oh my goodness. That car looks to be a wipeout. That's the worst spot you can hit this car. You can hit these cars. We see him trying to get back to pit road.
Gordon has had finishes of 39th and 43rd already this year. 39th coming at Rockingham and finished 43rd last at Texas. And it's going to be another disappointing finish for Jeff Gordon, the defending series champion.
Now, a lot of people ask, why did so many fans cheer Jeff Gordon when he crashed? Because so many fans weren't Jeff Gordon fans. We like the veterans that came before. And in the words of Dylan Thomas, we were raging against the dying of the light. We knew Gordon was the future, that he was so good none of the veterans could stop him. But we knew if, just if, he somehow fell out, maybe one of the old guys could still win another race. But that was happening less and less, and through this same era, Gordon reigned supreme. There was no Earnhardt and Gordon rivalry. Like many of the 24's wins, the victory was decisive. What made this era the best was that we all knew it was ending, and we feared what was coming. And the future did come. In 1999, Dale Jr. and Tony Stewart. In 2000, Matt Kenseth, Ryan Newman, and Kurt Busch. In 2001, Kevin Harvick. And of course, Jimmy Johnson. Not only had we lost the Intimidator, but the very face of the sport had changed completely. Several retirements and a few changes to the cars later, and here we are today. Now, what's the one thing I haven't mentioned in this entire video? The racing itself. Plenty has already been said about that. Plenty has already been done. It's all anyone's talking about these days. But the problem is it's now treated as the fix-all to everything. That if the racing was just more competitive, the sport would be as big as it once was in the late 90s. But that just isn't true. Every aspect of the sport demands that much more care and attention. All of it has to have the singular purpose of showing off just how exciting stock car racing is and how special the individuals are who compete in it. This is what us old folk are pointing to when we talk about the good old days. It may have been a perfect storm of several things that nobody had any control over, but it wasn't just in our heads. It was a feeling, a spirit that for some reason got lost when the new generation came along. Will we ever get back to that again? Who knows? But the past is always there, and the future is always unwritten.
In America, there exists a sport that is driven by the fans. They are why everyone works so hard, on the teams and at the tracks, in front of the grandstands and behind the scenes, to give the fans the greatest race possible. NASCAR fans deserve the best, starting from the high banks of Daytona, all the way to the shores of California, and at every race in between. NASCAR fans, you're the reason for our success. Thanks.